Is it a shakedown?
You better believe it's a shakedown. It completely goes around the legal process. The message this sends to foreign investors: be careful here, because the United States can resemble a banana republic overnight with the wrong president in charge.
And it teaches them how vulnerable they are if the politicians decide to target the stock price, which they can do.
I don't get it, Richard. I mean, help me here. You've got the Iraqis protesting about electricity shortage, basic needs, pretty basic stuff. We've got oil piling up on the beaches, jobs still in the dumps, workplace safety, #1 issue. And the critics of the president, it seems from both right and left, are most roiled by his response to BP, and the right's going mad that he manages to extract $20 billion for a repair fund.
Right. You know, I mean, I think the Republican Party here is really demonstrating that it is the defenders of corporate America. That's their paymasters, and that's what they're doing here. The response from the left, you know, to Obama, I think, has more to do with the lack of details on the climate bill that he offered, or an energy bill. So he's getting hit, I think, pretty hard from both directions.
Ari Melber in The Nation magazine wrote about right and left coming together, comparing Charles Krauthammer's response to Obama's speech on energy a week ago and Rachel Maddow's, and making that point that they're both saying there was a lack of detail. But I'm not sure there's as much coming together exactly.
No. There's a sort of convergence, I think, in beating up on the president. And it was, to my mind, also a pretty lackluster speech. You know, the thing about the Republican response, though, which is interesting, is Joe Barton has been singled out because he said that Obama, you know, shook down BP, and he apologized to BP for the America's response. He later recanted that. And he was actually repudiated by people in the Republican Party, including Joe Cow from Louisiana, Haley Barbour. But, you know, the proof is really in the pudding. So I don't really care what Joe Barton says and how many people stand up there during congressional testimony and, you know, lay into Tony Hayward, the CEO of BP. What matters is how are they going to vote on climate change legislation and energy legislation. So there, I think you have to look at Mary Landrieu, Democrat, huge recipient of oil money over the years. Other Republicans from the Gulf states who are, you know, totally going after BP with lip service, but where are they going to be when it comes down to the votes?
Good question. And where is this guy going to be? This is Mitch McConnell apologizing for Barton's apology for his lack of apology, or call for an apology. So I think this is apologizing for an apology for a call for an apology. Here you go.
If Republicans were in charge, this is the guy who'd be overseeing BP.
I apologize.
He apologized to BP and called the recovery fund a tragedy.
Senator, how do you counter the Democrats' argument that Republicans care more about oil companies than they do about the environment?
Well, of course, that's nonsense. I couldn't disagree with Joe Barton more. BP doesn't need an apology. They need to apologize to us, and they certainly need to cover all the cost of the cleanup and the economic damages as well, and they're going to.
I mean, this is the debate not just on Fox News.
No, I mean, you know, recovering the costs of the spill should be the minimum. I mean, that should have been settled on day one. And the fact that now we're weeks into the tragedy and we're still debating whether or not the $20 billion fund is enough. And by the way, you know, that's a floor for what BP is going to compensate for. And it doesn't actually then reduce the lawsuits that may happen, the fines from the EPA. None of that was taken off the table.
Although,
so it wasn't a quid pro quo.
We hope it's a floor. I mean, the president says it's not a cap, but I haven't heard it out of BP's mouth.
Right.
Let me ask you, I went to this Tea Party rally.
Yeah.
It was very small, 20 people, about an hour outside of New York, and they were listening to the pitches of two primary candidates who would like to run against Chuck Schumer on the Republican side. This conversation about the $20 billion, while we can joke about it, and while your point is very good, how will these people actually vote, it resonates. I mean, there is a concern about private property, whether it was the private property of those who had lent to GM and saw their collateral kind of seized by the government, or the BP investors who, as you heard there, maybe see a threat to their stock price by this use of presidential power. The left needs to address this, I think, absurd though we may think it is.
I mean, that just, if that's true, it's a really screwy sense of sympathy. What about the private property of the shrimp farmers? What about the private property of the business owners, the restaurant owners? What about the public property, which is the Gulf? where is the concern for small people, as BP calls them, their well-being, their ability to make money, their livelihoods? To have sympathy for BP in this instance, I think that really shows what the Tea Party is. It's a party masquerading. It's a corporation really masquerading as a political movement.
Well, Richard Trumka said to the Campaign for America's Future this last week, our politics seems to be about a choice between apostles of hate masquerading as populists and voices of complacency masquerading as progressivism. Well put?
Yeah, I think that's very well put, and I think part of what rankles the left about Obama's response to this is that he hasn't taken, really the offensive, laying out specifically what an energy plan is going to be, or even getting rid of some of, these liability caps. I mean, I know Democrats are pushing that, but he really needs to come out, and totally change the regulatory atmosphere here, and also the legal context in which this happened.
And finally, before you go, we've got about 30 seconds, but there are a lot of rumors swirling about Rahm Emanuel. You think he'll be here at the end of the month?
Oh, what are the rumors? I don't know.
The rumors is he might have to step down, or he might resign, go do something else. Talk has been heard about his concern about the time he gets to spend with his young family.
Oh, I think. It's like a hydra. Cut that head off, and you're going to get another, I think, centrist Clintonite in that position.
All right, Richard Kim. You can find out more at thenation.com. We'll have links to all of Richard's articles and a whole lot more, so check it out.